I would say, is construction, health, safety, and well-being. And the thing I would like to say most about methodology is I think I have been I tend to challenge the orthodoxy, but we'll get onto that later. I've had some great comments back at me claiming things that I never even said I was doing. So we've got a lot to go into here, Linda. So that'll do me for now. I'll pass on to Mike.
No, so Fred.
Sorry, dude. Yeah.
Well, I would like to. Would you like to introduce Mike?
How come I didn't get the opportunity? But I trust Fred very much.
You trust me. You trust me. I have known Mike for a long time. We have drunk together on many a continent. We have also done a lot of good work. Mike and I work together regularly as part of the CIB research network and group. I'm joint coordinator of the one on safety and health in construction right now. Mike's job there is way more important than that. I'm not sure what it is, but hey, it's pretty cool. So Mike's does some very cool research. Your stuff on green walls, I don't think has been surpassed in terms of safety shit. Would you agree?
Safety shit.
Sorry.
Safety shit. Get into that.
And I think, so I have seen Mike present some blooming really good, robust research into the fact how safety actually matters in certain things. And he is a pleasure to know. So I'm going to pass him over. And I did have to rescue him once in Cape Town.
Oh, wow.
I had to look out for him. Yeah.
Like, really? I don't remember that.
No, you were running away.
Oh,
was it oh, was that? Yeah, I think that was Cape Town. Yeah.
We shall not mention Cape Town. That's a whole nother broadcast.
Well, no, that was I think that was in the afternoon without any beer yet. Actually.
No, it was. We were stone cold sober, dude. As well.
Yeah.
Wow. I think I'm going to start hanging with you guys. Mike, do you want to add anything to Fred's glorious introduction?
Yeah, no, thanks, Fred. I mean, I'm a professor of occupational safety at East Carolina, which is in North Carolina, Greenville, North Carolina. And so Fred and I have known each other, probably 10, 12 years, I think. Mm-hmm. And, Fred is the coordinator of CIBW 99, which is the Working Commission on Construction Safety and Health for this organization, CIB, which I used to be the coordinator for. So
You did?
What?
You did. I'm just agreeing with you.
And that would be.
This isn't going to go well.
I thought there was an interrogative.
I know. You did?
It's just the English accent. I can't follow it.
Okay, so is that your introduction?
I mentored Fred for that role.
Oh, okay. All right. It's on. So the reason for this broadcast, as I said, is about research. And I got the idea of this broadcast and thought these two wonderful humans would come on here and actually talk to me about their pet peeves and some do's and don'ts on research, especially in the occupational health and safety field. And I mentioned this because Mike posted a little bit ago on LinkedIn about somebody who had misquoted his work. And so, one of the things that I always kind of talk about, we were talking about before we got on the air, was that if you have poor building blocks to build upon, then as you put another block on, you're actually building a faulty structure. Mm-hmm. And so in occupational health and safety, it's just not enough to throw something out there. You really have to do a good job with the mechanics that goes along with research. So, Mike, did you want to elaborate a little bit on your post there of being misquoted?
Well, yeah, and I think just in general, I think the field of occupational safety is very anecdotal in terms of the practice. I don't think I don't think academics do a good job of connecting with practitioners, and vice versa. So I think it's a two-way street. But it's interesting to be misquoted, and I think my first real instance of that was, I think I was telling you, Linda, this before. I'm going to tell the same story. I'm sitting at a conference, listening to an architect talk about safety through design, which is my life's work. And, he brings up my name on the slide and said, "Oh, this guy Behm said that 40% of all fatalities are due to architects, and you shouldn't listen to this. This is a bunch of crap. And so, there I am just kind of slunking down and being all embarrassed. And so that's kind of how, and then I realized through, looking at things like Google Scholar gives you the opportunity to see how your research is being used. And is it really just an exercise in writing something, right, Fred? Or, is it really useful or impactful? And so, you can kind of follow some things and see that. And sometimes you see things where your research just gets mischaracterized, and I think it does, just a damage to the science.
Right. Right. Fred, have you ever been misquoted?
There have been a few occasions. Most amusingly, in a thesis I was just about to examine, where the candidate had misquoted me quite badly. So that was quite interesting. There is kind of, if there are any PGR candidates on the call, people do say you ought to cite your examiner somewhere. But if you're going to do that, do it properly. Don't just throw it in, because they're going to spot that. So there's a top tip for you already.
Let's go have a beer. Sherratt, 2000.
Yeah, exactly, that kind of quality. So I have been. So it's really strange. As Mike said, it'll appear on a slide or it'll appear in a paper, and you'll see. I think actually, I'll spin this ahead. It does happen, but also sometimes I have been reading a paper and I've been looking at the bottom, going, "This is brilliant. This is really, really good." And I turn it over, and they'd also cited me. That was me being brilliant. So it works both ways when you see yourself. But yeah, you need to be careful that it's not misaligned, because the work I do and the work Mike does is very different actually, in terms of methodology and how we approach stuff. So yeah, I have been, and it's not good. No, because it builds to all further wrong things, as Mike said.
And it just leads to further misquoting, right, on down the road. And my pet peeve is that that happens, yes. But it also is that in our field of study, and I'm just going to say broadly, occupational health and safety, that a lot of times we have people who say something, and if they say something 10 times, white rabbit, white rabbit, white rabbit, right, that it becomes true. And so, I know that a lot of people in occupational health and safety really want the body of knowledge to advance, right? But the way not to advance it appropriately is to not do your research correctly, but also not put any research behind your thoughts at all. And I'm not saying don't have thoughts, because everybody has thoughts, but if you're going to say something and you're going to try to make it true, then you need to get yourself into a master's program or a PhD program and have somebody guide you through whether or not that is statistically and sound in the world of where we practice. So I mean that's kind of all wrapped in one. And one of the things that Mike had mentioned to me the last time that we had talked was, being cited 650 times is not a badge of honor, right? It's seminal work, of course, that you should be quoting that. But if you're cited 650 times, how many of those are correct? And did they trace that back through the cited by?
And the other thing too, I think. Oh, Fred, go ahead.
Well, I think we're probably going to say the same thing, because the way to get cited is to say something really fucking stupid. That's wrong. And then everybody will cite you because they are citing you to correct you or challenge you. So I know of one paper particularly that I've cited, and I've cited it in a way saying this person has said this. The research behind it doesn't stack up. This isn't appropriate, but that person still has a citation because Google Scholar cannot tell the difference. Right. So you have people who actually bring. I don't think they do it necessarily maliciously. It is a way of gaming the system because professors need citations. We all want a great H index, right? So why not write something crazy, get it published, and then people will cite you to correct you. Was that what you were going, Mike? Because
no,
what you go then?
I think that's true too, but I think that also like for me, I think in the field of safety through design, especially in the field of construction and architecture, like my paper was kind of like one of the first ones, I guess, in safety science, and it kind of, so like I think that people, when they're writing about safety through design, they feel like they have to cite that paper because everybody else cited that paper, but I think that some of the most impactful work, happened later, and I don't think anyone's really reading that work. The stuff about the green roofs and the green walls, and all the interventions in terms of studying architects and engineers and how they think, and that work. That I don't know if people really read that work, and that's kind of disconcerting to me as well too. That well, geez, I'm like, what the heck are you citing? Something that was 16 years ago. There's so much more interesting work that's built on that. So my whole thing is, people really need to read, and to really become an expert in a discipline. I mean, you really need to know that discipline really well. And like Linda, you were saying about, I think you were using the analogy of like a tree. I thought that was a really good analogy the other day, just the branches of the particular discipline. So trying to think about how, so for me, so I need to learn more about how do architects think, and design thinking, and those types of things. And so, you're just constantly learning about a particular discipline. And I think that's exciting.
I always get the question, when am I done?
Yeah.
And the question is
never.
Well, never. Yeah. But for a dissertation, the best dissertation is a done dissertation, right? And, you have to have a discrete cutoff point, where you're still kind of filtering papers as you are finishing your work, right? But you're done when you're done, right? And I know this sounds really kind of obtuse, but you'll know it, right? Because that when you wrap your hands around or your arms around something, you got a good grasp. And so if you don't have that good grasp, then keep reading, okay? And just for Fred, for your knowledge, I was telling Mike how I kind of described to students the literature search, and how you put that story together to support your entire premise of your paper, like why you're doing, what topic you're working in, why you're doing this, what are the topics involved in this, what are the subtopics involved in this, what glances off the edges, and why we're not talking about that. And then you have to bring it back to actually, so this is why it's important. Okay. And so when I said to Mike, I said, I talked to my students about a tree. I'm like, here you have the trunk of the tree, and you start by reading, and you branch out, and there's all these branches going out from your root, or the root of the tree. And some of them you're going to cut off, and you're going to tar on the end, right? And it's important to do that in your literature search, because when you get to defense, you want somebody not to ask you, why did you cut off that branch? You're going to have explained it, right? Why you tarred it. And the rest of the branches that are really important to what you're doing, you're shaping towards that point, right? So I don't know what kind of tree is like that, but you're shaping it, maybe a Christmas tree, right? You're shaping it towards the star. And so, I'm gonna even say like 75% of the stuff you're gonna push off as crap, and you're gonna cut the branches off, but the rest you're gonna mold into that point of the crux of what you're getting at. And so that was the analogy, or that is the analogy. And you can tell me I'm full of shit, right? But that's how I tell my students to approach it. It's a mind map, but a really focused mind map.
You can. I want to say something.
Yeah. So for all the students that might be out there listening, so my advice in terms of what Linda's saying. So when someone asks you a question that sounds like it's kind of sort of related, but it's not related, I think the standard answer is, wow, that's a really good point. That's a little bit beyond the scope of my particular research. And that would be a great future research question that I could put into my conclusions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. Right.
That's how I would answer those questions that are kind of
ideally, though, Mike. Ideally,
the branch.
You're going to have lopped off that branch in there, so they can't even ask the freaking question, right?
But that's the answer.
Yeah, that's a nice answer, though. I'm actually gonna copy and paste that answer somewhere. But go ahead, Fred. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I think you do need to You need to set the boundaries in what is a finite project. Like you say, Linda, you've got to be able to get your arms around it, or it's just too much. And I kind of feel for people because there is inevitably an exponential increase in literature. So even from when I did my gig, however many years ago that was now, it's like there are so many more papers because in part for professionals, they need to be aware that there is an academic career job, which is to publish, because if you do not publish, you do not have a career in this gig. So I think that's something worth thinking of, is that people are publishing a lot. And so, as Mike says, but your paper was really seminal, Mike. I'm really sorry, but it so was, which is why everyone cites it on your safety by design stuff. And then, yes, things have built on that, but it wouldn't be a bad place you'd want to see. I would be uncomfortable looking at a piece of work in this area that didn't cite you, because I would think they hadn't actually got to grips with the body from where it started and what it built on. Because as we mentioned earlier, to be able to evaluate the robustness of what you're looking at, you need to know the foundations it's on. And if we are going back, like the Laurent situation, which I'm sure you'll get round to in due course, it's if that isn't robust, and we can't have that kind of academic integrity in the research that's being underpinning what we then pass out into practice. And I noticed David has put an interesting comment in the sideline that I'm more than happy to get onto later. If professionals cannot be convinced of the rigor and the validity, the robustness of what we do, then you're right. It's not adding to the enhancement of anything other than people having more lines on their CV, which is pretty much, papers are just crazy. I think my CV is about 20 pages long, and it really shouldn't be. But
well,
has to do it.
Yeah, and I think too, I think from the academic side, there is a lot of pressure to publish, but it's that I think until you get a little bit older, I guess, unfortunately, you kind of realize that it's more about the impact.
Yes, very much so. And that's something to reiterate. Yeah,
that's that takes a couple years until you kind of get into it, and kind of think about quality over quantity. And I think in the beginning you're trying to balance both things.
So I have a friend that says build your legacy, not your legend, right? And so your legend is that long CV, right? But it's also your legacy, right? And your legacy is leaving hopefully a seminal work. Like you said, Michael's work is seminal, right? It is. And I talk a lot, students always want to pick certain areas that are hot topics, right? And, I picked a hot topic. I wrote on mindfulness. And so, but the bad thing about writing on a hot topic is that there's so much out there to wade through that's bad, right? And so, and similarly, if you choose a topic that is like brand new and hasn't been written on, then you have to draw a lot from other disciplines in order to support what your theory is or what your research question is. And so you kind of want to choose, and this is just my opinion, you kind of want to choose something that, unless it's like a super great idea and you really are a great writer and a great researcher, you want to choose something that's not rife with crap and not something that's so brand new that you're going to be writing forever in order to support it. That's just my opinion. And Fred, you mentioned David had a good point in the chat box. Did you want to address his point?
Well, I'm seeing here that about sort of, so this is in part also talking to impact. So impact of academic research. Academic papers are notorious, including most of mine, are notoriously overly flowery written, because I read a lot of books from like the golden age of crime fiction. So I sound like I'm writing a Sherlock Holmes story in nearly all of my papers, which is, I enjoy it, and many of my readers do, but some people find that a little bit awkward and unhelpful. So impact is actually translating that into practice. And I think I think David's question here is about how do we convince people to pay for these. So I'm assuming, David, I don't think they can talk, but if I've got you wrong, please correct me. In terms of sort of the value of the academic research understanding that underpins these things, and how we, it's about translating that impact clearly to the point where, and that's an academic role, to the point where the practitioner can look at it and it's clear, it's unambiguous, it's straightforward. It does not, lots of academics write to make themselves feel clever. That is absolutely not right. And it's about getting that impact to the point where the professional can say, look, this is the latest thinking theory, however we want to put that. This came clearly out of this underpinning research. They can go back, and then you are able to kind of hopefully articulate the value of being able to critically think and explore specific industry contexts, the culture, organizational culture of a specific firm in which you are maybe operating, or a field, and so on. And I kind of hope that's a little bit helpful, but it's about this idea of impact. I think, Mike, is the thing to pull on here in terms of what academia can actually beneficially contribute to professional practice.
Man, I got to tell you something, you two. I actually invited you on this show so that I could be lectured to, and I could learn something. So it's been a whole ruse, right? I just brought you on the show so that you could teach me how to teach other people. So this is terrific, right? I mean, it's terrific that it's taped, because I'm going to use some of this verbiage, if that's okay with you. So let's talk a little bit about, I think one of the other things that maybe David is getting at is, not everybody is doing academic research on a master's and a PhD level. And they have to be able to receive that knowledge in the way that most of our professional practice can receive it. And so one of the things that Mike and I talked about the other day is, what's a peer-reviewed journal and what's not a peer-reviewed journal, even though it says it's a peer-reviewed journal.
Yeah.
And how to make that translation from academic research to either lower level peer-reviewed journal, or a journal for which a practitioner can take solid knowledge. What's the difference?
Do you want to take that, Mike, or shall I?
Well, we could kind of go back.
You go first. I'm just looking something up in my CV actually that speaks to this. So, Mike, you go, and I'll find out what I was going to say.
So a lot of the really good peer review journals in our field, you need library access.
Yeah.
To access those, and then there's some others that are, what are called open access journals, and some in terms of the economics, somebody has to pay for that. Either it's the library, or in like some of these open access journals, it becomes that the author pays themselves. Mm-hmm. And so then that becomes that becomes a little bit of a conundrum where you're kind of paying to publish, and does the quality go down? And so there's a lot of issues. So peer reviewed, gosh, it's like, it's caveat emptor, buyer beware, right? And that's why I think David's point too is about being a good consumer of research. And I don't think we do a good job in terms of, the professional societies, providing members with continuing development about how to become a good consumer of research. So that's an excellent point. That's a need, I think globally, and ensuring that practitioners can decipher research at some kind of basic level. So as David was talking about, so they can, impart that to their management, who really doesn't know anything about probably workplace safety and health and relies on them.
So I think, so you're talking about being the consumer of the research. It's also our responsibility as academics to deliver it and translate it properly. And that's kind of how you get impact. So in the UK, we're always, impact is the thing. So nobody's really that interested that you've written a load of papers. It's what you do with them. So so I was just double checking, because I publish in things like JCEM, which is the American Civil Engineering Journal, but I've also published similar work, not the same, but work that is able to provide a similar sort of understanding and add to the discussion in Professional Safety, which is a practitioner journal, I think she says. Right. Yeah, I am right. And they're both American, I think, for some reason.
Well, professional, just to jump
back. Is it or not?
Well, Professional Safety will say they're a peer-reviewed journal.
Okay.
And the way that I describe it, and forgive me, it's the difference between an academic peer-reviewed journal and People magazine. So, I mean, that may be extreme, right? And I will say that, but not everybody wants to wade through statistics and all this other kind of stuff. And I think of Professional Safety and other journals like that as being peer reviewed for the practitioner and not academic.
So that's kind of my point, is that I publish stuff through the Chartered Institute of Building in the UK as well, because I know the readership is going to be different, but I'm still getting my work out there. And it is robust work, because I also publish in peer review. Not the same, so please don't misunderstand me. Publishing the same thing in two places is called plagiarism, and that's not good. So that isn't what I'm saying. Because there are different.
Are we recording this?
Yes, we are.
Shush. So the point being that it's about, as an academic, trying to reach your audience, and I totally get the distinction between the two in terms of the rigor of going into that process. But as an academic with integrity, I would try and put. I would put my work. I try and get it out into places where people can read it.
Integrity.
I haven't got any room left.
Oh.
So,
Michael,
so
I think
you can have some of mine. It's all right. So I think that's super important, actually. I'm just seeing if we've got any.
Yeah, and it is really important. And having those venues. A lot of times in academia, we're on to the next research project, and we forget about that translation piece. And U.S. academics, at least I know, there's not a good reward system for that translational piece.
Right.
And that's a real shame. It'll come back in conference proceedings or conference talks or invited presentations, and things of that nature. Those are ways to kind of, the academics can translate their research to practice. And
most schools aren't sending people to conferences, and I mean, they are saying go and speak, right, on your research, but you're not going to 4 or 5 conferences a year, because it's not feasible.
Yeah. So
most universities anyway. Yeah.
So my research was, a lot of it fit into NIOSH and their prevention through design program, and some of the green building, the safe and green building stuff that we did. And so a lot of my presentations were through NIOSH and NIOSH's early prevention through design initiative, which I believe started in 2007 or 2008. They were very active in getting us out to, I spoke, I did speak with Donna Heidel, the original NIOSH PTD coordinator. We were going to 2 or 3 conferences every year for 2 or 3 years and talking about prevention through design and, what it is, how to do it, so they did a really good job. In terms of, trying to, and again, just got fortunate that I was doing something that then they became interested in.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it was just by, I guess, good fortune that, I had that opportunity to get my research out early on. Now, of course,
Mm-hmm.
now, things are fading.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, there's not a lot of places to put your research out there, and I would venture to say, and this is an overgeneralization, so I this is not present company involved, but researchers also need to be able to put their research into words. Like, it sounds like, Fred, that you already do that. It's like a crime novel, right? But you need to be able to put your research into the professional safeties and the trade journals and whatever in a way that it can be consumed and not misquoted or misused or extrapolated or all those other things that happen with things in our field. I mean, I mean, nothing irks me more than to go to a conference and sit through something that I'm just like, not true. Where's the research? I just, I would rather see an academic be able to translate, and I think maybe that's few and far between. And then what's that tier that we put in order to bring the academics to the masses?
If an academic were able to translate, they'd be a consultant. If a consultant were able to do research, they'd be an academic.
Yeah. I mean, you're quite right, Mike. That's it.
That's the truth.
So do both of you do consulting?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But I mean,
not
specialty consulting.
Yeah, it's very niche, and I'm normally brought in as somebody to help a consulting for it's like part of another package. Although I have done consulting directly with construction firms, and there's a big push in the UK at the moment that quite a lot of funding comes from collaborations with industry. So you have to have an industry partner, particularly in the construction sector, for any research, and that would include safety research. So you're kind of embedded in it to a degree, but I think, I mean, so we don't help ourselves in quite a lot of ways because people do write because they feel that it's super clever. The bigger the words they can use, the better they are, which doesn't help. There is also a tendency perhaps to kind of strike. So construction research is interesting because it's vocational. So it comes out of a vocational subject. So we do have, I mean, I've written some of the most navel gazing papers going. I've written whole papers that have absolutely no research in them at all, Linda. You'd be horrified. It's basically just me having a bitch. But it's quite a robust bitch. It's fully cited. So it's actually in terms of what are you producing and how digestible is that by people? Are they actually interested? So sort of to try and move it on. So I do methodologically kind of weird work. So I don't. That's a big
sell.
Yeah, I know. So what I do is I can't do numbers. I've done one survey in my entire life. What I do is constructionist work, which is, I'm going to use some really awful words there, and I'm so sorry, everybody, which is very differently ontologically and epistemologically grounded. So this is what happens.
You're always using big words.
Those are Latin, right? I cannot be held responsible. So the difference being that, and this of course influences where you ground yourself in this really kind of firm bit. And I've been doing a lot of work with some colleagues at Colorado U in Boulder. So this was bringing this different way of looking at things. So I do work that's based in social constructionism. There is no generalizability. Everything is unique and unique with people. Because in construction, we kind of started out looking at steel and concrete, and that was great because that follows the laws of physics. That's positivistic research. That's awesome. But what happened was then we kept trying to apply that to people. Now, people don't do the same things that concrete and steel does because they're inconsistent, they're annoying, they're weird, they're freaky. They do all these kind of weird shit that you cannot predict and you cannot justify. Ergo, in my mind, to ever find anything out about safety around behavior and things, a survey is not the way to go. You need to be in amongst it, checking it out, seeing what's going on. So we're here on the tenets of good research. Now, what is the most important thing in the world is pick the right methodology for the question you want to answer. Because if you actually want to know what people do on building sites and construction sites, You can't do it in a one-shot.
there.
You have to go there. And I was super lucky. So I was a site manager. I was screaming at people. I mean, my job used to just be shouting at men. It was brilliant. So I used to walk around a building site shouting at men. But I was doing my research as I was going. So it wasn't quite ethnographic work, although I do supervise ethnographic projects. I had one PGR that was just embedded in a project for 3 years. Poor chap, including making him get his ass there for 7 a.m. And so he was living it, and I thought that was super important. The insights that we got across a range of different aspects of management and safety was fantastic. But that is a luxury. Who has 3 years to go hang out on a building site and not work? Who has the funding for it? And those opportunities are few and far between. So
I would say they're like a rare unicorn kind of situation, right? I mean, most of the students that I have at Cap Tech, actually all of the students at Cap Tech are working professionals, right? And so they have to work, and then they have to find time for their studies. That's
a bitch.
And that hurts. But I just want to jump back to, you came from working on a construction site and hollering at men, right? For 30 years, I was a consultant, and I did, and a safety director, and I did the same thing. I worked with people, right? And so I come from 30 years of that to now an academic role, which I may or may not fit amongst you all, but that grounds who I am and how I see things and how I advise people to go about what seems to them to be an insurmountable goal of completing a dissertation while working and while trying to earn money and while managing a family and that type of stuff. So, but there is great value in being a working professional, because it informs what you do. It informs everything you do.
So this is the total embodiment of an emic perspective from ethnographic terms, is that you're that informed insider able to translate. And I did my PhD part-time. I was pulling 78 hours a week whilst doing it. I think that my final year I had 1 day off, and that was Christmas Day, so I really treated myself there. But I used to hours on site, come home, graft in the evening, and you have to do that. But I would argue that doing it that way, the insights, the richness, the understanding I was able to bring to that material was you couldn't teach that to somebody. That's the thing. And I think it's important for any vocational course where we are so closely aligned with practice. Linda, I think you are the best sort of academic, frankly. You've been there, and I don't know Mike's background, so I might be really rude here, but I would value the opinion
to say after this.
I know, if you've been out in amongst it, I think that's brilliant, because you then bring that academic lens, that understanding, and you can bring the two together, and I think that is really, really important. So I'm going to leave.
Have you ever read a paper, right? And you're sitting on site, or you're working with people, and you read this paper, and you're like, I don't care if that you think that's significant or not. What you're saying is wrong.
Almost
right?
every safety climate's.
On climate and culture. Don't get me started on climate and culture. So let's talk about climate and culture. I have a fair amount of students that come in thinking they're gonna do climate culture research, and I could be wrong about this too. I'm probably wrong about 95% of the time, but
that means you're right 5%.
I know, right? There you go.
That's pretty good, actually.
I'm working on legacy, not legend.
So.
They want to do culture and climate research, and unless they do what you're talking about, Fred, where they're embedded in a system, right? And I'm going to say, or a project or a company, right? You can't survey about culture or climate because it's specific to that microcosm of whatever they're doing, right? So, my first question is, well, before we even start going down this road of culture and climate and multicultural workforces and whatever, what's your population? Do you have some idea of where you're going to go with this? Because it's all great to have this idea and want to follow this research question, but if you don't have a population when you get to chapter 3, what are you going to do? A survey? And then it's going to mean nothings, right? So then your work, all this work is for naught. And so I'm really hesitant to let people go down culture and climate unless they have something in hand that they can grasp, that they can see themselves grasping to.
Can I talk again, Mike?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You've
known me for 12 years. You know you're not going to get a word in.
Mike's just here to look pretty.
He is, isn't he? Well done for bringing the glamour to the whole gig.
He's so dreamy.
So, Linda, this is super interesting because my thesis, when I started as a PhD student, I was going to solve safety culture. Yeah, that went the way you thought it might, which is why I ended up in the philosophical place that I did. And this was kind of really weird because I did a construction undergraduate degree. I didn't start that till I was 25 because I was mucking about too much. And where that ended up was I had to basically go out and think, right, culture did it. And the more I read about methodology, I ended up pretty much reading Plato to get a start and going from there, right? So this is a subject I know a lot about, right? And where I ended up was in this social constructionist space where everything is situated, everything is fluid, there is no constant truth because things change, and we know they do. And that spoke to me so much as a person, in part because I used to be a temp secretary. And I used to, and to amuse myself, because I was only 18, right? And you're an idiot when you're 18. I used to go to different jobs every week. And I go
before you go to the pub.
Yeah, I'd be there going, who am I going to be this week? Am I going to be super smart Fred? Am I going to be crazy Fred? And you can do this. We construct and reconstruct our identities all the time, right? Yeah. So anyway, pulling this back to somewhere that's hopefully more interesting for folks on the call. So from that point, I ended up looking at constructionism. The way we analyze that is through discourse analysis and safety culture. And this is a very established theory in safety science and all industries, is that safety culture is actually the kind of composite of the discourses that we make sense of things. So around safety, there is always, and I notice Sridhar has already made this comment in the chat, that safety, there is a constant discourse of work versus safety and safety versus work. And there is a big fight going on there all the time. Mm-hmm. And so that's just one discourse of safety that's really identifiable in the construction, and that will have more and less influence at different periods and so on. At the end of all this, when I did all this, my supervisor still said, "You're going to do a survey, aren't you?" And I went, "Hell no." So I didn't. It was fine, right? Because I did not need a survey. But it's interesting because from my perspective, and do correct me if I'm wrong, in the States, you have very positivistic approach. So I don't know if this is true or not, but I did get a paper into JCEM, and I believe it was the first publication of discourse analysis research ever. So I'm quite chuffed with that. I'm not sure if I think that's true. So this is very different from statistical approaches and stuff like that. So there are different ways of doing this, but you have to be brave. And you also have to be aware that everyone will try and smash you down and say that's bad science. And I would counter with, I never said it was science in the first place. Judge me by my own benchmarks of validity and reliability, and I'll listen to you. If you're just going to say to me that's not generalizable, I'll go, you know what? I never said it was. Yeah. End of rant.
Oh man, you know what? I feel like we're doing a commercial for you as a dissertation chair.
Do you want to stop that, Linda?
Anybody who likes what Fred is saying, we have a deal for you, but we'll talk about that some other time. Mike, do you want to say anything?
Well, yeah, Fred will let me. No, I'm kidding, Fred. I'm kidding, Fred.
Oh, is it, Mike? We've done this. You don't have to apologize. I'm British. It's okay. The more you take the piss, the more I know you love me. That's how we roll over here.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, and I was thinking about this really, I think this really interesting study that one of my graduate students did. Gosh, this is like 2010, 2011. He was really interested in, I was working with a social worker, and she used a technique called photo voice, which is where, the researcher gives participants cameras, the disposable cameras. I could use your phone, I guess, if the population has those. But photo voice is really, it's not necessarily just about the photos. It's really about the researcher transferring power to the participants. So in survey research and other research, it's researcher driven. We have the question. We have the preconceived ideas of guide words that we might use to follow something to make it valid and reliable. Whereas in photo voice, you give the participants these cameras and you just tell them, hey, can you just take some pictures and tell me about workplace safety and health? And it's just that open. And
I love that.
And then you go through and so, gosh, I could talk so much about photo voice. We could do a whole thing just on this.
You're on.
But then it's, you sit down. What are you doing
next week?
You sit down with the participants, and you just say, hey, so tell me why you took that picture. What was going through your mind? And they have this, and you have this rich discussion. And so, photo voice has been used with to understand homeless people, to understand children with autism, children with dyslexia, adults with dyslexia. My colleague used it with commercial fishermen and their families to understand, what does the family think when the male is gone, for 3 or 4 weeks at a time off scallop fishing in the North Atlantic, and what's that like, and what's that like when a big storm goes through, and what is it like when you can't radio home? And so just fascinating stuff. And so these pictures, when you look at a picture, you have your interpretation, but through photo voice you hear the photographer, the participants' interpretation of that particular photo and what they're thinking. And so so my student used this with migrant farm workers, all Hispanic migrant farm workers. And he looked at 2 camps, and he was given 2 camps specifically by the people who helped him kind of get there, because they were interested in kind of what he would find. And they didn't tell him kind of what was going on. So here's this 22-year-old, white male working with an interpreter. And, it was amazing just to see how he grew as a person and as an individual. One of the proudest moments, and Fred, you'll really appreciate this, I think, is that we have this institutional review board. It's a ethical review board, and they said, okay, yeah, you can do this study, but you can't interview anybody who's a minor or under 18. And so one of the people in the camps was actually like 16, and so he stopped the interview. And then he didn't do the interview, and so then he came back to me and came back to the office, and he was, because I was always like, oh, you have to get as much data as possible, and he's like, well, Mike, I stopped the interview. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, Trey, this is the proudest moment because because you thought about somebody else, you thought about their views and their and so that kind of I think research when you're doing, I think, more qualitative research and more ethnographies and these types of things, and really getting to know people, which is what culture is about. Back to the original question, it's not just some paper survey, tick the box, I strongly agree with 55 different items. It's about getting to know. Right? It's about being empathetic and understanding and trying to be open-minded and trying to hear different voices in different manners. And so, I think the qualitative methodologies are just so underutilized in this particular, and it's not just climate and safety culture, but in I think all aspects of occupational safety and health research, qualitative methodologies are just so underutilized. Yeah. And I think they're just so rich. And so the final thing, Fred, the final thing before I owe you like
you yielded the floor, Fred. Don't yield.
We call this filibustering here in the U.S., yeah. Fred.
I know.
But he through these photos he was able to actually, so there were 2 camps. One camp was documented workers, and the other camp was undocumented workers. And there's so many things that stood out, but the one thing that stood out was that the documented workers took pictures of their housing. And it was a positive thing. They were so proud of the housing that they had, the bathrooms that they had, the sinks that they had, and the non H2A camp, didn't take any pictures of their housing, and so we had this really interesting study where we used a safety climate survey only to code the qualitative information. And of course that never got published because, Fred, qualitative research doesn't get published. It gets rejected because we didn't have a large enough sample size, and it's all bullshit. But we found it was so impactful. It was so meaningful. And
So I just want to say before Fred takes the floor that research, right? That is super important. And so maybe the point, where that could have gone is to the lower tier peer-reviewed journal, where it's not so much about the statistical analysis, but it's about learning the tenets of empathy and how people think and why they think the way they think, and those important observations, right? I mean, should that go in that lower level peer-reviewed journal? That's my question.
So the problem we have here, this is another problem that academia, and particularly construction, although general occupational safety research, I would say Safety Science is a really good journal, but it's actually really quite an open journal. It doesn't shut down on methodologies as much as some do, for sure. So Mike, my first point of umbrage is that there is no such thing as a qualitative methodology. There is only quantitative and qualitative data. You can analyze quant data in a qualitative way, and vice versa. Okay, so sorry, it's a pet peeve of mine, because what it is it's research involving qualitative data, and it's super. The work that Mike's describing, I've seen some of this photo voice stuff. It's really, really good. It's so rich, it's insightful. But what we need to do is get away from this problem around sample and population. So this is where ontological positions and epistemology matters. So I'm going to do a really, really shameless self-cite here, if that's all right. So in the journal,
that's right.
Yeah,
Don't plagiarize.
So in the Journal of Construction Engineering Management, so the that particular journal, myself and Rob Light from Penn State did an analysis, because our paper was titled Bias, Everything is Biased. And that's because an enormous amount of qualitative work gets challenged on bias. As you said, Mike, the sample wasn't big enough. We can't generalize. This is bias because it's subjective. Well, yeah, it is. And we never said it was anything else. What we've done here is explicate it so you can see that this finds fit with reality. But that's a bit too much for some people, apparently. So what we did was we wrote this paper. We wrote this paper specifically to point out these fundamental methodological challenges that we have not got to grips with, and good research is being rejected out of some pretty good journals because it happens to end up with reviewers that are only comfortable with surveys. And then people just staple a Cronbach's alpha to a survey and then pretend that's good enough. That also is frankly shit and not good enough either. So that is not a decent approach. So but I have made this call several times quite loudly and with a lot more swearing in a number of places. So particularly in JCEM, I have also done this in many other spaces, saying, guys, we need to, as academics, it is on us to be able to say, do you know what? I cannot peer review this work because I don't understand the epistemology. And you know what? That's fine. Just say so. What I don't want you to do is wade in and say, well, the sample's not enough and where's the validity and that's so not important. So my only point is the quant-qual data label, but beyond that, the methodologies that are not grounded in a realistic realistic ontology and positivistic epistemology, all those criteria are so niche that when we get to things like ethnography, photo voice, even just talking, unstructured interviews, things like that, that really take you into the places where things happen and give you a really good idea of that particular, what's occurring, to steal a very British phrase, what's going on in this particular space. Now, you need that richness and nuance. So, Mike, I completely agree. So, but it's on us as academics to say that. If someone gives me a survey to peer review, I'll put my hands up and say, I can't do it because I can't do it.
Yeah.
But nobody does it the other way.
So Mike and I had this conversation about peer reviewing, right? And what's your lane and what's not your lane,
yes,
right?
That's exactly it, Linda. Yeah.
And man, wouldn't it be great if people stayed in their lane?
Yep.
And and here's the thing. I'm okay about a 3-lane highway where you're going down the center lane and that's your lane and you're comfortable in that lane and you know that lane and you can drive to and from. And you may stray to the left or to the right, but if it's a 6-lane highway, don't be in the breakdown lane, right? Or don't be in up against the guardrail, because you have no business being there and reviewing and critiquing other people's work if that is not your lane, period. And so, and Mike and I talked about this, like his lane is prevention through design, right? And your lane, Fred, what's your lane?
Hers is a roundabout.
Hers is a roundabout. So it's a center point.
Yeah, here in my town we have a roundabout that's made of roundabouts. just think about that for a minute. It's one of only 2 in England. Okay, and probably the world, but hey. So my lane is it's workers and worker safety and what they do and ensuring they're not getting stiffed mainly. So it's actually trying to explore that culture space to actually find out what's going on. So I am very much, I play with qualitative data, which is where I'm comfortable. I also just remembered, I wrote a paper when I was doing my PhD, and I'll share the title with you. It's called, Are You Going to Put Some Statistics in There? The Challenges of Being a Qualitative Researcher in a Quantitative World and How to Politely Say No. So, Linda, I am happy to share that paper with you.
Can you send that to me and I'll attach it? I can attach it to the show.
Yeah, of course. And literally, I wrote this after 5 years of struggling to get my work published, because people were judging it on somebody else's criteria. And it's this peer review. Now, the problem that's sort of probably endemic in academia, and I think I can get away with this because I'm not yet a full professor. Mike, are you a full prof? Yeah, right, okay. That tends to go with the thing called ego. And there are a lot of people, not you, Mike, I love you dearly, you know that. There are a lot of people who are in these positions, and it is a position of power. It is a way of maintaining the canon. And what they are not able to do is actually realize and admit to themselves that they don't know something. And there is a lot of problems going around with that. And like I say, I'm big enough and ugly enough to say, you know what, I can't judge that. But the problem is that this has a two-pronged problem in that they are analysing qualitative work that maybe isn't that robust and good, but saying, oh, that's okay because they don't quite, or they just reject it outright. So some stuff does get through, but some of that stuff that gets through, the quality, because there's no working with qualitative data doesn't mean there's no rigor, doesn't mean there's no validity. This is still robust academic work. You can't just wander about and do what you want. That doesn't work like that. It takes a lot longer to do that properly than boshing out some shite survey. So you've actually got this kind of rigor to it. But I see qualitative data analysed in ways that I don't think is particularly robust, but people are much more comfortable with it because it's just looking at some words and then doing it through themes. And okay, but that still isn't good research.
Yeah. So I just want to make a comment. So I work for a small university. So, we don't have that. I'm a chair and there's a dean above me and he's lovely. And other than that, I mean, I don't worry about this type of tenure type things because it just doesn't apply. But I did work in a tenured university, and my observation is that there are people there to meant to keep you from rising.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is blasphemy, and I'm sorry for saying it, because these two aren't saying it. I'm saying this. There are people who are there to keep you from rising. And I feel my goal, now that I've achieved my PhD, is to let other people's rise with their ideas and with their research, not to gatekeep people getting to professor, not to keep people from getting published, because that does none of us any good. It just prevents the research from getting out there, prevents other people from getting into positions where they can really make a difference, where they can build their legacy, and not their I'm a legend in my own mind kind of thing. And I think that's a shame, because I think that what you're talking about, Fred, happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that shouldn't be, you shouldn't be forced to focus your research in order to achieve a job title or position or tenure, this just means I'm never going to get hired at a traditional university ever again. But that's okay. That's not my goal. So, but I just, I've kind of lived my life, and at least started to focus more on it recently, that, my goal here is to help other people rise. Right. And so, that's what we're talking about today is, how do we help you rise
Mm-hmm.
in the world of research? And how do we help you hone those skills, whether it be academic or research or personal skills, empathy for workers, right? Especially if you're a working professional, right? If you're talking about working with people, you have to have feelings. It's just the way it's. I'm sorry. It's just not that clinical. Occupational safety, at least where we work, is not, boom, 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 boom. This happens because every situation is different. Period. Every company, every industry, it depends. It depends. Like, that's my pat answer for a lot of things. So that's my rant. So go ahead.
Well, I think we're actually really lucky to be in occupational health and safety, because it attracts nice people, even academe health and safety. So the group that I jointly coordinate is one of the nicest, friendliest, most supportive spaces. And I've strayed out of this into other areas of construction management research. And it's just not nice, really. I think there is something, those of us that choose to do this kind of research and work actually are all right. We're not wankers generally. So that's good. I divide the world into two sorts of people. However, academia in other disciplines can be a very harsh, horrible place for that end alone. So I'm always kind of grateful that we're doing this, because we actually care and we actually want to do something meaningful. Look at and actually caring enough to get super cross about things and do research that can generate and make a difference to people. I can still remember having to do the whip round when someone has an accident on site and they can't work and they've got a mortgage to pay, and everyone's chucking 20 quid in the pot. And I hold that very close to my heart, for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm going to cry.
No, don't cry. You're like the cat's out.
I'm also, and maybe I'll use this right. I'm very chuffed that I'm not a wanker.
Yes, there you go. Don't tell Mike.
However, Fred, I will say to you, Fred's gone.
I will the cat out.
Okay. I will say that there are many, and maybe even some watching, that think I am a wanker, and sometimes that has to happen in order for people to wake up. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Somebody has to call a wanker in order for people to wake up and see what they're doing and be called on their shit. Right.
Yeah.
And, that's part of being grown up. And so I'm glad I'm not a wanker with you, but in general,
not yet. No, I'm just kidding.
Not yet. I'll piss you off somehow.
Okay.
But so, I could go on and on. You guys are fantastic. Would you like to do this again?
Fred,
Sure.
I think I think Fred makes a good point though about our group. This construction safety and health group that we've been able to be part of. They just are extremely supportive people, and
beautiful place to be an academic.
we do have people, I think, Fred, on every continent that we could just pick up the phone or email, and they'd be right there for us, and to do things and to support us. And we were very fortunate to kind of find this group, I think. And just so that's
amazing.
There's some really, really good, and that's why I really hope, so Fred's hosting a conference up in Glasgow, Scotland with her colleague, Billy Hare, in September, and I hope we can get to travel. Fred, boy, I'm nervous.
Oh, come see us. I'll tell you drinking in Glasgow. You'll need about a week to recover.
Oh, man. So these guys like beer. These guys like beer for the listeners, and I'm also a connoisseur of beer, and but I don't read the label.
Hear that, Linda.
What was that?
I'm glad to hear that.
but I'm not that good that I read the label. The other night I had 2 beers, and I was like, why am I like falling down drunk? I don't understand this. And my wife looked at the labels, and she said, "This shit is 10% alcohol."
Oh my God!
She's like, it's like, I mean, like that's like drinking like a 12-pack of Bud Light, right? Wow. I mean, pretty much, right? And I said, well, no wonder, but it was so good. It was like a chocolate almond coconut stout, and it was.
Always happy. Yeah.
And I should have known better, right? But anyways, I'm a connoisseur of beer, but I'm not a very smart one. Anyways, tasted good going down. Otherwise, not so good. So I mean, we could go on and on. We could leave this and then come back for another one.
Sure.
I mean, my pet peeve right now is that I want to make sure that people know that good research can be done, not to rely on bad research, to make sure that you're really looking at, as Michael said, when you're looking at something and you're reading it, read it critically, and don't just look at cited by, right? Look at sites and then trace it back, right? And I talk a lot with my students about, you have to stay in the present, but somewhere you have to have a tie to that foundation. Okay. And so if you're not tracing it back to the foundation, then you haven't done your job in putting your arms around what you're talking about, right? There should be a couple seminal works in there in order to tell your story. So, I mean, that's my rant, right? Is that I just really think I want people to open their eyes to what research actually is, what it's not, what exists. Oh my gosh! I mean, I'm going to go look up photo voice. I mean, I didn't even. This is something new to me. So, I'd love to do a whole show on that. So, I mean,
methodology is a good one.
I could show the pictures from Trey's thesis.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be amazing.
Q methodology is another good one. If you wanted to do a session on interesting, weird methodologies to use with people that don't want to do a big bloody questionnaire, I would
love that. Would you guys come back for another show?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. If I could talk about photo voice, I'd love to.
Okay, so we're going to do weird research methodologies and photo voice.
It's not weird. It's just.
Okay. No, well, I'll do Q methodology. I can do photo voice.
Okay. And I mean, I think 2 separate sections because I feel like we could like just talk for hours.
A very long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't usually give shameless plugs, but I do I do have a lot of dissertation students and so there are some books that may be helpful to people who are on this call that are students and they're like, what the hell do I use? Right. I mean, there's some good resources out there, but I'm bad with this camera thing. So writing a proposal for your dissertation, very good book. Fred's going to recognize this one.
Oops.
Writing built.
Can I?
My students love this, by the way.
Okay, I only wrote 2 chapters in there. I wrote the qualitative data analysis because I've just admitted I can't do a survey to save my life. But so don't take that off me. That's all Peter, and he is. Okay,
awesome. This is Peter. This is not. But Fred's name was on it. So
no, I wrote 2 chapters. The qual data chapters I wrote.
But they love this book because it talks a lot about how to put together the mechanics of a dissertation. You guys are going to laugh at these, right? Literature reviews made easy, but it does tell a lot about talking, about storytelling, right? Because I always say, chapter 2 is your story, and if you write a good story, right, your chapter 1 and your chapter 3 will fall out. It will be like a blossoming, if you put your arms around this and then you let it bloom, 1 and 3 are right there. They're all contained in that research, and so. People are very linear a lot of the times, and they talk about, I'm going to write my introduction, and then I'm going to write my literature review, and then I'm going to write well, yes, you do have to have an introduction, right? But that should be in your proposal. Your introduction is basically, there's a lot of stuff that you can mine for your introduction, your research question, etc. But if you write a good literature review, those other 2 chapters are right there. So don't get hung up on chapter 1, get hung up on what's out there and what's crap and what's not. So that's just me. Those are just some of the things that I use as I'm starting dissertation with students. Go ahead.
I have a sneaky book that I make my students usually read, which is helps with the writing of that literature review and how to pull that together. Stephen King on writing. It's brilliant. It's really, really
I'm going to write it down.
And I have had a professional doctorate student. He literally stopped me in the corridor. He said, "You remember like a year ago, you told me to read that Stephen King book?" And I went, yeah, I did. It's in one of my presentations. I do coaching on academic writing, right? And he said that was the best tip I ever had. So he really got on with it. So it's not very long. Stephen King is an awesome storyteller. I am talking about the Stephen King.
Yeah, Stephen King.
But his little book on writing is about the craft and how to pull that together in a way. Because if you can take your reader by the hand at the start of your thesis or dissertation and bring them with you in the way he does, you will have that. That's what you should be aiming for.
It's storytelling, right?
Totally.
It's storytelling. Dr. McAndrew, who's the dean at Capital Tech, he assigns a mathematician reads the newspaper.
Yeah. Good.
And so that's another, kind of like, how do you wrap your head around a story? Michael, you got anything for us? Or are you just going to let Fred and I talk?
Not as exciting as you guys have. Oh, I'm writing this stuff down. Actually, you probably saw me like writing stuff down here. So this is great.
So we're going to do another couple episodes of this. Hopefully we haven't bored the shit out of people watching.
People seem to like it. They might have all gone to have
I'm entertained. I am super entertained. So that really is all that matters, because this is my page and my live stream. So you guys are going to kill me, but I didn't start the broadcast until after you had introduced yourself.
Okay.
So we're gonna we started with the middle. We got most of everything except for your introduction. So if you would please just one more time, Fred, tell me who you are,
who I am, and about me.
And would you like, if you want to tell people how to contact you with that, which I'm not sure is a good idea, you can do that.
Terrible idea. But I'm in hiding.
Please tell us again, Dr. Fred Sherratt, a little bit about yourself.
Yep. So I am an ex-builder. I used to run building sites in the UK for over 10 years. And then whilst doing my part-time PhD, then I switched to academia because of the recession. Unfortunately, the jobs just dried up in the UK. Luckily, I was nearly finishing a PhD, so I became an academic, and I'm currently an associate professor of construction management at my institution. I'm also deputy dean for research and innovation at the moment in the faculty. So that's Anglia Ruskin University in the UK. I'm also a chartered builder, by the way, I forgot to say that, and many other things, like in civil engineering, all that sort of thing. So that's me. But I'm also, I'm an angry researcher in that I do very different stuff to the norm. I deal with qualitative data, different methodologies, epistemologies, and I am all for good research being held true to what it sets itself as a benchmark. And that's the important thing that I think is lacking. That's me.
She's also lovely. She's lovely. Mike Behm. I'm not going to let her introduce you this time like I did.
No, I wouldn't. It just dissolved into beer. talk.
You did a great job.
How about we do one whole show of us just drinking beer?
I could do that.
Yeah.
Talk about research.
Let's not start at 11 a.m. our time.
I can do that.
I
can get away with it.
I don't know if I can do that. So I'm Mike Behm. I'm a professor of occupational safety at East Carolina University in the state of North Carolina. And I worked for 10 years in corporate America, and then I actually quit I quit my full-time job and went back to school full-time for a PhD at Oregon State University. So that was the route that I took and landed in academia.
Yep. Great.
And
you guys, go ahead.
Fred and I know each other for 12 years.
Far too well.
Far too well. I think Fred and I met in Australia.
No, we didn't. I've never been there. It's too far away.
Oh, it's too far away.
They're going to make me go, though, in 2022.
That was some other woman, Mike.
That was some other woman.
Actually, who the hell are you mistaking for me? Was it Billy?
Obviously somebody very smart and
it was in DC, Mike.
Oh.
It was in DC we met.
Okay.
So 10-year anniversary.
I can't remember anything because he probably was just drunk, I guess. But he has known you for a long time. And I'm Linda Martin, and I am the chair of safety programs at Capital Tech University in Laurel, Maryland. And I chair dissertations in occupational health and safety, not so much in construction science, but I am kind of peripherally involved, and also construction cybersecurity. So you guys are amazing. And we are going to be back on a call talking about weird research methodologies and photo voice. And you guys tune in next time. So thank you, Mike, and thank you, Fred.
Thanks for having us.
All right,
Thanks,
and this has been Linda Martin. This has been Linda Martin with the Safety Struggle, and another fun time on the live stream. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.